to do this really well, here comes Patrick. We are all going to sing happy birthday to Peter, whose birthday it is today. So ready? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Peter Spencer. Happy birthday to you. Thank you for sharing your day.
Thank you very much. This is unexpected. I mean, it's not a state secret, but it's very nice. Thanks a lot.
Well, and there's one for Meg as well, because Meg who has, you're welcome, seen us in the past, has relocated finally back from England to the United States and more or less rebooting with this book, right?
Correct.
So
yes.
I thought
Is this on? Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I thought a cupcake for you.
The cupcake from Barbara is always
Right.
that makes my
However, our experience is if you try to eat them while we're talking, it's just so messy. So we're going to
I figured that.
Yeah.
See, now that I'm older, I'm wiser about things like that. I won't mess it up.
Right. Now, why am I calling him Peter Spencer? I'm going to actually call him Peter because I never could remember to call him Spencer. And the answer is his actual name is Peter Abrams. And we met over various books that you met here, and long ago you published a really fabulous thriller set here in Arizona that involved tunnels under borders and other stuff.
They're wildest
How long
dreams.
ago was that?
Well, it was in this century, and
It's not as far along as it used to be. But still.
right. So I can't remember the exact date, but in the 2000 and somethings, I'm going to say 6.
And that was before you took up Chet and Bernie and...
It says so. Is that, should we start it over with singing Happy Birthday? Let's do it a few times, actually.
We could trade microphones because nobody cares what I say. Seriously, take mine.
No, but is this, let's ask Pat, is it working, Patrick? Are we?
Can you guys hear? I can't.
Oh, okay. So, and what about for the recording?
Yeah, it's showing up on the...
Okay, great. Then I'm not going to think about it again.
Okay.
A 1 and a 2.
Okay.
So, what was the, let me remind
Well,
you. Yes, so I wrote Their Wildest Dreams, and that's the first book that got me interested in writing about Arizona and led to where I was going to set the whole Chet and Bernie mystery series, which is the series I write, narrated by the detective's dog, Chet. And when last seen in Sense and Sensibility, Bernie was in bad shape at the very end. I wish I hadn't done that, because I'm not exaggerating, every day I get either angry, annoyed, wistful, or brokenhearted emails, many of them all in caps, about the latest. So, although this book, The Right Side, that I'm talking about tonight, is not a Chet and Bernie, and there is a dog in it, there is more Chet and Bernie to come. Okay, so.
I figured that when you skipped the book last year, that you were just letting Bernie heal.
Well, that's part of it. You see, the new one is going to start off as they enter their home, leaving the hospital. And then there are certain big things that are going to happen, and they're back in gear. It'll explain how they got better. I mean, how Bernie recovered. But just, sticking it in there to not slow down the story.
But he needed an extra year. Some of you think that either we missed having Peter or something, but the truth is he didn't have a book last year, and publishers don't send authors out randomly. If there isn't a particular reason, although we would have been happy to have invited you to come out and play.
The real story is that on my birthday, Barbara didn't recognize him last year.
we had no cupcakes.
We had a fight. Don't forget, I did have a book come
That's true. You did.
in my children's Bowser.
Very good. All right, Matt, let's go over and hear your story because it's been a while since we've seen you.
Since you saw me here last, also on another very sunny summer evening.
Too hot summer day.
But I was living in London at the time. I don't know if anybody remembers. I'm a Californian, and my husband's job was transferred to London. We lived there for many years, and it's been recently we moved to Austin, Texas, because I guess we just couldn't get enough of that humidity. So we relocated, and that process took a while, and while I was doing that, I started this book, UNSUB, which is the first in a brand new series. so that's what I've been doing. I've been putting an entire house and life, aside from the Mini Cooper that my son is still driving in London, putting it all into a shipping container to get getting a custom seal put across it to get put on a container ship to be sent across the Atlantic Ocean and removed in Texas and start writing a new series about police detective.
I can already see that you've missed a potential great plot if you just ship Mini Cooper and your kid in the container. Think of the good things that you could do.
His English girlfriend would have gone for that, because then she could just show up in the United States and pretend she'd been here all along.
Okay. Well, we're thrilled to have you back, and as I understand it, this book, UNSUB, taps into, in fact, your own childhood.
In a kind of spooky way. The genesis of the book, I hate to use the word the inspiration, because we're talking about a serial killer. One of the sparks for the book was the Zodiac case. I grew up in Southern California, where the Zodiac was legendary. Even as a little kid, we'd all seen the police, the drawing in the newspaper of the guy in the executioner's hood with the symbol on the front of it with the gun. We were all aware that the Zodiac was out there, strike anywhere, anytime. You never knew when he was coming, what he was going to do, other than he was always sending letters to the cops and to the newspapers and these creepy codes that he demanded that they publish and people try to solve. So late at night, it kind of gave me the creeps to listen out the window and wonder who was out there. And more recently, I found out that my very safe, shiny, sunny suburban neighborhood in Santa Barbara, the two couples who were murdered there were the victims of another serial killer within walking distance of my parents' home, which totally just grabbed at my throat. So that kind of made me think that, okay, things that scare me, I tend to try to turn into fiction. I try to inflict my own nightmares on my readers in the nicest way, so that you have a thrilling experience. But I took the kind of the creepy psychological aspects of the Zodiac case, and the fact that this was never solved. This most infamous, now almost mythological killer, who was, who, like I said, he wrote 37 letters to the papers. He called the cops and would always, immediately after his murders, he would call the cops and say, there's been a double murder. I did it. Then he would hang up the payphone, and when the dispatcher would look out the window, she'd realize that it was the payphone outside across the street. He was seen by witnesses, survivors, and police officers without unmasked, but nobody's ever been able to identify him, much less make an arrest. And being a thriller writer, I started to think, okay, someone who just disappeared on his own terms, left the field, what is there to stop somebody like that deciding to pick up where he left off?
Wow, it's a Jack the Ripper story, but yes, I can see you have a comment.
Oh no, I loved it. I mean, can I say that?
You can say that over and over and over.
Along with Happy Birthday.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Let's do Happy Birthday again. But yeah, I love the book, and you use the word spooky, and it's spooky.
Good.
I mean, spooky's good, right?
Yeah. I want everybody to enjoy reading it. It can be a roller coaster ride. It's a psychological thrill ride, but I wanted to explore the psychology of somebody who, what kind of person does this? What kind of secret inner life do they have? Because they're going to be somebody who's got a job, probably a family. They're outwardly seen as a normal member of the community, but they're not. So that's what it's about. The young cop who is very green, has no homicide experience, and she's thrown into trying to track down this killer.
So she is the key pronoun. And one of the reasons I thought this would be interesting to have the two of you together is you both created these female characters who are formidable and powerful and take no prisoners and all of that.
Well, it's not the only point of congruency.
No, there are more, but that was the first one.
No, yeah, that is. Okay, yeah, I didn't mean to trample on you. I guess I'm being...
No. I just didn't want you to think I was that shallow.
No, okay, I don't think that. No, I promise. Oh my God. No, this is why my publisher doesn't like it when I go on the road. Right? Because over and over there are things like this. No, both have these strong, courageous female characters who are almost pioneers in the jobs they're doing, and they both have problematic fathers. So there were a couple things like that. Now, other than that, there isn't much, but those are big things.
Well, I think the unresolved issue, the real life one in Meg's book, and then, your book resolves in part, but doesn't resolve in other parts, I thought was an interesting point of
I gave it as
congruency,
happy an ending as I could and make it credible.
But it's a fair ending. It's a satisfying ending, and it's a true ending because I mean, Leanne is such an incredible character, so brave, so damaged, so out of control during part of the book, and trying to figure out how to pull it back together. That if you had made it, if she'd had a cupcake at the end, it really would have been false.
Thank God I didn't think of the cupcake, because I would have fallen for it. And, I mean, that was, I think, my thinking along the way. But she's, I mean, that's how this book, The Right Side, started too. It came, I mean, it's not as direct as like thinking about the Zodiac Killer and What If and stuff like that, but what happened was just this character of Leanne just popped into my mind. But it must be in, I've been writing these Chet and Bernie books and the Bowser and Bernie, which are, I guess, okay, dark things happen, but the tone is essentially comic, right? Would we agree on that? But, I'm not ignorant completely of things going on in the world. If I took a test, I'd get a C+ or something like that in current affairs. And so I think it had an effect on me. The wars we're fighting, and I don't know whether the reasons are good or bad, but I didn't want to look at it from that telescope, from a distance. I wanted a book that had to do with those people on the point of the spear. And I thought, and a very unusual thing is happening, that we have these, women now in the military who are, even so, they'll often called non-combatants, are getting into combat situations. And Leanne, where she serves those CST people, that's exactly true. That is happening, and they're on the line. But I thought it was a perfect way, I thought it was a good way that we, okay, maybe it's not good in every way, but women in this country have advanced to these areas that were male only historically for so long. And now she's, I mean, it's certainly good to have women advancing. But then you put her in this country, Afghanistan, where the women aren't, I mean, they're in a medieval situation. And it just, for me, focused a lot of the problems that are going on. And of course, the central mystery of what actually happened at the end that went wrong is all about male and female and those things. But in a distant situation. There are other, I mean, this book, once I had the character, I could have forced her into a kind of story. It was, let's say, a pure mystery. But I kind of let her just run. So this book is part mystery, it's part war novel, it's part road novel, and I think it's part sort of almost female literature.
Have we mentioned the dog?
I left out the dog, which is, on the cover.
There was a slight clue.
So stupid. The dog, of course, is crucial, but this is not a narrating dog.
Nor is it cute and cuddly.
And it's
I'm writing to you.
So I thought, can I write a dog that's very different from Chet? Well, I kind of have, but never in a major role. Like Iggy, if you know the Chet and Bertie, is another dog. It was very different from Chet. But this dog is very, very different and much harder to get to know, but crucial to what happens to me.
You've written about damaged characters before. I mean, it isn't like you've never done that. I still remember your character that had the asbestos disease. That was one of your most hair-raising books.
He was dying.
Nor
did
it have a happy ending.
No, it didn't. Well, he was a sculptor, and he found of some note. And so when you're a person of some note, the New York Times has already prepared your obituary. And I can't remember how exactly I did it, but I hope in a credible fashion, he got, through some friend in journalism, he got to see his obituary, and there was a mistake in it about his own life. It was wrong. And he began to pull at that thread, and he found that much of his understanding of how his life had been was false. But he was still had this asbestosis and was going to die.
One of my favorite books, actually.
Nerve damage.
Peter and I have sparred together for years. I was a devoted reader of his books before you wrote Chet and Bernie, so.
And a huge help to him in many ways.
True. Worked out extremely well. And Meg, you won the Edgar way back, and you have written at least 2 other series characters. Maybe 3?
This is my third. This is my third
This
series.
is the third series.
The first series is the Evan Delaney series.
Okay.
And that the first book in that series, Channel 8, won Edgar.
Right.
Best paperback original. There's also the Joe Beckett series about
Right.
the San Francisco forensic psychiatrist.
Right, and that was a hair-raising series. I mean, it wasn't like you spared her money.
No, she's a widow and she's got to overcome all these kind of things. And
Yeah, but there were some really hair-raising scenes in those books too. I like them.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah, I mean,
a real forensic psychiatrist wrote an article about forensic psychiatrists in literature, and she included Joe Beckett. And the comment she made was, every Joe Beckett book and turns out to have Joe at the heart of this case, really working to solve it. And I thought, well, of course.
Or did she write that as a negative?
The cases that her colleagues solve don't get written about, even in fiction. So.
no, unless you have an ensemble cast.
Right,
of forensic
exactly. Yes.
psychiatrists who are doing it.
But,
That's an interesting, sometimes people's evaluation of books just floors me. I mean, the one thing that they fasten upon or whatever, I'm sure you run across those too in reviews and you think, really?
Well, of course, now I've got to be really, really careful how am I going to phrase
Yes, we
this.
are live.
But also with these nice people, there's less professional reviewing than there used to be, but there's was anybody going to be insulted if I say amateur reviewing? I only mean it as non-paid. In other words, just ordinary people reviewing, and I think some of it is very refreshing and good, but I think what Barbara says, I mean, you see people with hobby horses a lot of the time, and so they glom onto something in your book which isn't major, it's off the track, but they make that the centerpiece of their, well, you gotta love them.
Now, let me just say, because I'm still irritated about it, and it has nothing to do with your review, but we're publishing a book in August that says all over it in large letters, metafiction, not your ordinary crime novel. It has a blurb from Dean Koontz, it has a blurb from Jeffrey Deaver, and one from Greg Hurwitz, all of whom say it's about the creative, whatever it is. And the Publisher's Weekly Review, a professional reviewer, ended, fans of traditional mysteries may be puzzled by the ambiguity in the ending. And I'm going, you idiot, that's the whole point of the book. Sorry, I just enraged.
No.
you can have mine.
I can have your company. So let me say that it isn't a distinction between professional and amateur so much as I was thinking. As people find things in books that you didn't necessarily, or at least you weren't aware you had put in there, and it's interesting as both an editor from my side and author of yours to see what people take from a book, not necessarily a hobby, but just a direction or something.
Oh, absolutely.
That floor you, you think, really, was that in the book?
But as a writer, if you start to worry about that, and as you're writing, think, is this one of these things that's going to be taken wrong and form the basis of an idiotic Publisher's Weekly review? Forget that Publisher's
Sorry,
Weekly.
Peter.
An idiotic review.
It really was. I don't mind going live and saying it. I'm so annoyed.
But if you do that as a writer, you're putting the brakes on your own work. You're only going to you've got to just drive that story and not.
You have to write it for yourself.
Yes, but you can't be neurotic. You've got to really believe in it and just.
Once the book leaves our minds and enters the world, it's out of our control. I mean, we can believe that we're the gods of the world we've created here, but
Yes,
but readers have free will, and they will interpret it as they wish.
Yes, absolutely.
So here's another question for both of you. You know, how much do you as an author today trust in the criminal justice system, and how does that affect the way you might choose to wind up your story?
Oh,
Right.
thanks,
It's a
Barbara.
really tough- I ask myself this question a lot when editing books, you know.
The characters in my books probably trust the criminal justice system more than I do. Certainly the police officer in a fast-paced, in this book, is a very fast-paced criminal investigation. There are hints that she's aware of, you know, political issues, the issues of police violence, et cetera. And in the sequel, there's discussion about, well, we're going to Washington, D.C., what are we going to tour, the Smithsonian or the wreckage of our democracy? But on a day-to-day basis, I think that there is still a fair amount of regular law and order going on, at least so far, in the country. When my mother or my friends or my relatives have served on juries, they still say that they think that they've been able to come to a fair verdict. But an interesting juxtaposition, I was reading about some South American crime novels. This is a little bit far afield, but Colombian crime novelists are apparently, a number of them are baffled by the whole idea that you would have the police be expected to solve the crime in the story, because that's not what police do, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, you have to, I think you have to look around the rest of the world. I mean, that's, I think we do a fairly decent job, partly because our Constitution is so good. We're a democracy still, and partly because we have a jury system where, you know, in parts of Europe, juries aren't nearly as important. You know, it's judge or 3 judge panels. But here, I think the people get to speak. As for the police, I wouldn't want to be one. I mean, it's a really, really tough job, and they're people. I think they do most of them do pretty much as the best job they can.
Well, I was asking in part from the point of view of a reader. When those of you get our e-news, now I wrote you a little feature about Agatha Christie today, because apparently she's never going to die. She's just going to come back. Look after her, her work is going to come back. But when you read an Agatha Christie, you knew that when Poirot or Miss Marple or whoever, you know, had solved the crime, that justice was going to be pretty swift and generally merciless. You know, there was going to be a resolution. Killing somebody, being caught, meant you went to the hangman in almost all situations. So for a reader, you knew that there was closure, you know, at the end of the investigation. I'm not sure today as readers that we can necessarily think or, you know, believe that will ensue. But I also wondered if as writers, you know, when you decide how you're going to wind things up, if you think it will. It's probably an impossible question.
It is an impossible question. Sometimes I like a satisfying resolution. I don't like it to be completely tidy. I like to have a few threads left over.
And that's life too.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I mean, if you talk, I mean, the best crime novel ever written, in my opinion, is Crime and Punishment. I don't think there's another one that comes close, because it deals with all these questions. And a bad crime can never be fixed. That's why they're going to be, the justice system will say, okay, for that crime, it's XYZ punishment. But you've torn something. It can't be sewn back together. And of course, the great, not in any kind of systematic way. And so the great thing about Crime and Punishment is it isn't sewn together, but the ending is kind of spiritual and leaves the whole plane of human right and wrong and human struggles with all this into a spiritual, religious kind of level. And I mean, and it just soars when that happens. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but I mean, it's a wonderful answer to the problem.
So Meg, you're going to go on with, I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on
Caitlin Hendricks, yes.
Right, okay.
Yeah, this is the first in the series, and she, yeah, even if the justice system is flawed, crime continues to go on, and she'll always have work because murder is apparently her vocation.
So she's in California, or where did you set the book?
The next book takes place mostly everywhere but California. She is working another case with the FBI.
So she's had a bit of a career.
Yes, she's working with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit on tracking a very charming, devious killer across the western United States. They do come through Phoenix.
Oh, good. No, I really like the fact that she's moved up from a local police department to the FBI, because that means you can take her anywhere,
Exactly.
which is really good. What about Leanne? This was supposed to be a standalone.
It is a standalone, but
But you're
people are
thinking.
saying, but I'm thinking, but the next, I mean, I have like a to-do list. So the next thing I'm doing is a Chet and Bernie novel. That's the next thing I'm
Bringing
writing.
him back from the hospital. Right.
Yeah, yes, but he's going to be okay. And then certain things are going to happen. It's going to be a cheery. There'll be bad crime, but it's going to be cheery. But Leanne is a hard character to walk away from.
And her story is not all told.
And her story is not all told, so that's possible too. But I also am doing, I do this children middle grade series for Scholastic, and they want me. My editor asked me if I would do another series that's both cat and dog narrated. And I said yes. I said yes, and then she resigned. And I was stunned because she was one of the best editors I've ever had. Unbelievably great. And so, but I'm still going to do it. I mean, now there's a new editor who's very enthusiastic about it too. But so I'm going to. So what I did when she asked me, I didn't say yes and I didn't say no, because we had a cat named Neon. Neon got outside and got run over like on day 3, where we've had a million dogs and nothing bad ever happened. So, but one of my daughters, Rosie, has cats. She lives in DC, and so I've gotten to know cats. So I sat down just to write a paragraph of cat narration to see if I could do it. And then I called back and said yes. And the cat, I won't. Anyway, so that's it. Maybe on what I might do is, now that I've whetted your appetite, at chetthedog.com, maybe I'll put that paragraph up in a day or 2 or a week when I get back from the tour. So that's what I have to do first. I'm doing a Chet and Bernie and then a new kids. So that's going to take a year. So I don't know what's going to happen after that.
Who knows? Right. Okay. And if you have, well, actually, let me say that. Do you have questions you want to ask each other? You've obviously both read each other's books.
Yes.
So, what would you like to ask Megan, vice versa?
Well, one of the things I noticed was how beautifully you did the whole Bay Area setting.
Oh, thank you.
But that's not a question.
You can lavish praise on her too. That's okay.
Shower me.
No, it was great. But what about the father? Tell me how you did you have the father as a character right from the get-go?
I did. In UNSUB, the action takes place over about 10 days, but the case spans 25 years because it's about this legendary killer who vanished 20 years ago, and then 2 bodies are found in the present day bearing his signature, which is this symbol, Mercury, and which is when Caitlin is brought in because she's the daughter of the detective who investigated the original killings. Her dad was the lead homicide investigator, and he could never break the case. It broke him instead. And the killer got away, disappeared, and Mac was left, emotionally shattered, and it tore his family apart. So the senior homicide investigators want Caitlin to come into the case because they figure she's the one person who can draw out the father's insights. He's no longer on the force. His life has gone off the rails. And she's basically saying, no way. They're estranged. She thinks it's going to be a disaster, even trying to talk to him, and at first it is. But I wanted this, because the case spans a generation, and I wanted it to be about the investigators. I thought, what is a more, what is a stronger series of investigators than a father and you know, their child, and in this case the daughter. And they, so of course they have to try to repair their relationship over the course of the novel as well.
Oh, it worked beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Good.
The father, Leanne's father, they didn't have quite the same end with Leanne's father, but he kind of prepared her for this military life because he was an ex-Green Beret. So one of the very early, the book starts at Walter Reed, and what I used to frame it, I took the exact form that the psychiatrists use to diagnose PTSD, and I just took little bits of it, and then that section that comes after is really all about that. That's how but it moves back, it made it much easier to move back and forth through time without, I don't want you to hear the gear shifting like it's an old clunker. So I use that.
I do have a question about this.
Yeah.
This is a little writerly, but you do go between Leanne's, between her current state, what she's doing right now, flashes of what happened, or she doesn't know what happened completely in Afghanistan, and then back to her childhood, which works on so many levels, because I think if it was just Leanne now in the war, I think she would be an extremely difficult character to take page after page after page, because she is struggling so hard at the start of the book. But we see her when she was a kid, when she was a teenager, when she was joyful, when she just loved to laugh, and I think that really levens it and makes us root for her that much harder.
Thanks. Well, you see what's been lost.
Yeah.
You do, but she's also an unreliable narrator.
She's also an unreliable
Which is
narrator.
always interesting, you know, when somebody's when you're trying to figure out what the story is, and the person telling it to you doesn't know.
Yeah,
I like the Army investigator, by the way, a dogged.
Stallings, yeah. So there are elements of mystery, there are elements of investigation, and yes, so Stallings, yes, exactly. And he's dogged because he wants to find out what happened, that horrible thing that happened in Afghanistan with the interpreter and all that. So there's a scene that every once in a while you don't know what's going to be grist when you're a writer for your novel. So one of my daughters, not the one with the cats, my other daughter, in high school was a pole vaulter. So now, even though she was way too little, if you ever go to YouTube and look up the NC2A female pole vaulters. I mean, they're these, 5'10", really strong. They are all, it's that lean muscle body. Okay, Lily was like 5'1", maybe she was a gymnast. So the pole vault coach, like at that level, is going to recruit gymnasts. But you don't have any leverage, right? You're way too short to get, you can't use a long pole. It's a huge handicap. But so I watched her meets and I saw the pole vault, and that interested me in the pole vault. So I had Leanne when she was little. She's a gymnast, and then there's a scene with the gymnastics coach saying, look around at the other gymnasts. Do they look like her? Because she's grown. And she ends up in pole vaulting, and that leads to the scholarship, to going to West Point, which she doesn't do because of something horrific that happens. But so you never know. So, and she ends in Afghanistan. There's a scene where she goes to this school, and she's with the interpreter Katie, who's an Afghan woman who speaks beautiful BBC type English, and Leanne has decided that she's going to teach some of these Afghan girls how to do the pole vault. So she's ordered from back home the whole setup, and she does it on the schoolyard during recess, and she's really worried that they'll never be able to do it. And they're all wearing their robes, and she sets it at like 4 feet and walks the first one through, and she goes over, and in that costume with the white head thing and the black, she looks more like a porpoise. And it's one of the happiest moments in Leanne's whole life. And then Katie, the interpreter, looks up at a building across the street, and there's a man in traditional dress looking down, and Katie says, recess is over. And the whole problem of how we're going to solve all this is about pole vaulting with girls.
Hey, I'm old enough to remember when women were banned from pole vaulting. That's only been very recently introduced to competition, certainly at the Olympics.
Yeah, it doesn't go back. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. That is interesting. I've forgotten about that, but most of the contests were, in fact, the contests were.
Well, going back to the Greeks, of course,
Yeah.
where it started, there were the women, I don't know what they did. But
They used to
men-
also pole vault with bamboo poles and land in sand.
Yes, no, did you do it? I mean, you're
No,
talking
no,
about.
look at, I got chicken arms. I was a half miler, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's just so many ways to define character and bring it alive. It's interesting the things that you choose.
Oh, that's just, yes. So my mother, who taught me almost everything I know about writing when I was a kid, I mean it, 11 years old, said to me, don't do anything the way other people do. I mean, she didn't mean in life, and I made some mistakes by over-interpreting like that, but she meant in writing, don't bend every note, don't find what's unique in you and blow that up as big as you can, and that's what's on the page. Don't do, no boilerplate ever, not even for a paragraph, like when you just have to get somewhere, you know, like you're doing a scene and then you have to get to the next one. So in this book, as you get older, and now as you know, I'm very old, I think you can still keep learning. See, so let's say I was an NFL football player. Okay, my career would have been over a long, long time ago, probably even coaching, you know, because I'm up in Bill Belichick, you know, age. So, but in this, as long as you kind of keep yourself together, I think you can get better. So one of the things I did in the right side, all those getting to one scene from one to another, I jettisoned all that. There's none of that in there. There's no, yeah, I got rid of that.
It's very lean.
Yeah, it's lean. Okay.
Propulsive.
So, May, tell us about the pending television series.
Oh, cool. Yes, I'm so super thrilled. UNSUB has been bought by CBS for development as an hour-long television drama, which is just like...
Oh, that's great.
It is
Yeah.
very exciting. You didn't see me running around my yard like flailing like a muppet. So,
Those chicken arm things.
Yes, exactly.
That's great.
It's for CBS TV, the production company that is putting it together, Timberman Beverly. They did Justified, and they do Elementary, and Masters of Sex. So they know a lot about really great television and crime dramas in particular. So they are putting together, getting writers organized and a showrunner, and we'll see. I'm just giddy.
That's great.
Wonderful. So it's episodic?
Yeah, it's going to be 1 hour weekly television
Segments.
drama. Yeah.
Right. Rob and I just watched The Tunnel. We're always behind because I spent all my time reading rights. I never actually watched television, but occasionally you do. And I couldn't believe how many plot holes there actually were in season 1 of The Tunnel. There was the baby that disappeared. I mean, it just vanished, sort of like in episode 6. I said to her, "Where's the baby?" It's like, "Oh, let's just forget the baby," well, forget it never existed or something. I thought it was really fascinating, that the show didn't bother with the same logic that probably you two would have been applying, as we went along. And then there is a season 2, but I also realized with Brexit, the whole mechanism of the tunnel won't work anymore because you can't just get your car and drive into England from France and vice versa. Now you're going to be going through a frontier and all of that, so it's going to change. But anyway, I thought about as episodic television, it's interesting that you could sort of like go in some odd ways and drop stuff and all and still get away with it, whereas most of the time I have found episodic television to be more logical.
We'll see.
So,
It's not going to be meta. It's not going to be Twin Peaks, as far as I know.
All right, Peter, anything up with you on the visual front?
Well, Chet and Bernie have been under option in Hollywood since before Doggone It came out. It's run through 2 studios and maybe 4 or 5 producers, and it's still alive.
Oh, good.
So, you don't know. I've had probably, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say I've had a dozen books optioned by various producers. Only one was made into a movie. That was, I wrote a book called The Fan that was really a crime fiction novel that took place in the world of professional baseball. And so they made it, Robert De Niro was the fan, and Wesley Snipes, for some reason, was the baseball player, which changed everything. Ellen Barkin, they had a really good cast. Benicio del Toro was in that. Yeah, so, but the one I wanted to happen was a book I wrote called Oblivion, and Paul Giamatti wanted to make it. And his production company had it for a long time, and he would have been absolutely perfect. But you don't know what's going on in their minds. You just, it's another world. I have a niece in that fairly high up position, so I can debrief her and I still don't understand. It's best not to worry about it. You know, I can only control what's between the two covers. That's it.
That's a very good answer. How about questions from you guys, the audience?
When will we get Bernie out of the hospital as well? I mean, we've been.
Well, when will it come into your hand? Yeah.
I figured he was going to be okay because you always write another book. You know, that's kind of the thing. But all of a sudden, then you didn't write another book.
Yeah, I feel for you. I understand exactly what is going on in your mind. Well, I'm in the writing process right now, and they haven't named a pub date yet. I hope to find out a pub date soon, like I'm saying within a month, and when I do, I'll put it in the social media. Okay, so you can go to SpenceQuinn.com or check the dog's blog, or there's a Facebook, there's a Twitter, it's all over the place. But I'll put it up, I promise. And it's going to happen. It's for sure going to happen.
And he'll come back. Don't worry about
I feel
that
better
either.
now.
Right. Right. Anybody else have a question? Sorry.
Spencer, did you, what kind of research did you do on your character?
For the right side,
Yeah.
The character came kind of in my mind fully formed, like what I wanted. And at that time, I didn't even realize there was these cultural support people. Then I did a lot of reading into what they were doing and stuff like that, because I wanted, then as soon as I had read about them, that they existed, I thought, okay, well, the nightmare is they go into one of these villages. Okay, the idea of the CSTs were, when our special ops people went into these Afghan villages and they were trying to find the bad guys, after a while they realized they were only talking to half the population because the women wouldn't talk to them. So they formed these are women who, it's non-combatant, but they're armed, and they go in there and they separate the women, and our women talk to their women, usually with a translator, although some of them have learned some Pashto and stuff like that. And the intelligence got way, way better. But the nightmare, of course, is that, okay, they've got the women, they're all in their burqas, and suddenly out from one of these burqas comes a hairy hand, right? And that's the nightmare. Okay, and I wanted, and it's happened, and so that was something I did. And then I wanted to get all the military stuff right, and I haven't been to Afghanistan, and I wasn't in the military, but I have a lot of friends who were great to me, especially a former sergeant from Omaha who spent 20 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, all added up together. He looked, you know, sometimes when you give a manuscript to somebody, you know, and it's always great if they look it over. I appreciate it so much. But he went over it with a fine-tooth comb. Like any little mistake, not just an obvious thing like I got a weapon wrong or something like that, but just somebody said something that he wouldn't quite say it like that. So he was, one helped me, and the other one was someone who was at the very, very top of secret type stuff we do, who's done unbelievable stuff, hair-raising, and I spent a lot of time with him too, so that was really it. But then some other people, those two were really, really cool.
Meg, were you able to talk to people who worked on the Zodiac case, or who remembered it?
Not when I was writing the book, but since then I've been contacted by people who were investigators on the case. And apparently at another bookstore last night by someone who claimed to know who the Zodiac was, and called into the store while I was speaking and wanted to but I was busy.
Wasn't there a serial killer in Kansas? I'm trying to think of his name.
Yes.
Who retired and then returned,
yes,
right?
Dennis Rader, BTK.
Right.
He was, and I mentioned that these people can seem totally normal part of the community. Dennis Rader had a a very standard job with the city. He was the president of his church, his Presbyterian church. He was a scout leader, and he liked to find, torture, and kill people.
Did he explain why he quit? And because my understanding is most of them can't quit. You know, it's an impulse that just goes on.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had said that he was kind of coasting on the memories for a long time. And then a reporter wrote a book about where did BTK go, and speculated about him. And he thought the reporter got it wrong, and he started thinking about all the rest of the murders he still wanted.
Ouch. That's
But-
really horrible.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but
that is.
he was going to do it anyway. I think if it hadn't been that, it would have been something else. I mean, there's always going to be a spark. This was in him. It was some dreadful urge. He called it the creature.
Well, I mean, you have to think that Jack the Ripper didn't just retire. Something probably occurred to
He
take
could have
him out.
died, I mean.
Exactly, you know, and it makes you think the Zodiac Killer may well have also, you know, just died. And
Could have died.
Nobody knew who he was, so.
Right? Could have died. Could have been in prison. Could have
Yeah.
moved
For
to
something else,
Australia.
yeah.
Right.
Could be sitting at home, leafing through the albums,
But I
reading
think
his press
that's
clippings.
the least likely scenario. You know, and now that there's more global technology and so forth, I always wondered if Jack the Ripper hadn't simply gone somewhere else, you know, because it seems so improbable that he would have just quit. But you couldn't really track in those days easily.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
maybe
that's going
today
to
it's
change, the
easier.
tracking is going to change the writing of crime fiction incredibly. It already has. You know, the rise of the appearance of the cell phone. But what's happening now in terms of, you know, what, you know, smartphones are going to become, you know, it's not going to be anything like a phone anymore. You might just have an ear thing, and you're going to see, you'll be walking down the street and there'll be a person coming up to you, and you're going to see kind of an overhead thing with that person's name and what they do. Everybody is going to be tracked unless you opt out somehow. You're going to be tracked 24/7.
Did you read about China today in the Wall Street Journal? They've actually started doing that with facial recognition and other kinds of things. And if you're a Chinese, if you're in China and all this is going on, you now get to earn, what is it, social credits? Or so good citizen or something. And if you, it's like your driver's license, if you get points on it, if you get to, the illustration was a young woman who, for the second time, tried to beat a red light and didn't make it. And they just nailed her and said, you've already offended once, and here you are again, and they're using facial recognition, all sorts of things. I mean, if you read UK crime novels, at least in London, there's nothing that isn't on CCTV.
Yeah.
I mean, or even out in the country now.
Well, it's hateful as far as I'm concerned.
So, well,
I loathe it.
all I'm saying is that as a
As a person,
Yeah.
as a writer, but as a person and a
But
writer, I hate it.
as a writer, it's going to be more and more difficult.
Oh, absolutely. But, you know, funnily enough, because, you know, the bad things in the human heart will never change. There'll still be stuff, and it'll be fun to write.
But the challenge will be to beat technology, maybe more than even the police. You know, it'll be maybe a different kind of
right.
you know.
Yeah.
We always have more to learn about here.
Absolutely. Yeah. To stay up. Right. Anybody else have a question? Yes, Gina.
So after writing so many books with a dog and a man, its main characters, what kind of thought went into now having to write about a woman with that perspective for you?
I mean, that's a great question, Gina. I've written other female characters before, and I like doing it. I really believe there's such a thing as the imagination, and that we're not in these silos, you know, that a white man can only write about other white men, and how, you know, if we're, I think that's crazy, and it's going to make us very dull people. So I thought this book would be way more effective, both because of the issues, but also because there's been lots of fiction, you know, about male warriors, but because there haven't been many female warriors yet, there isn't much fiction about them. So I thought this was an early way to get in that. So and as soon as I started writing about her, I found it very refreshing to be, writing. This is third person, so it's not I. But it's third person close. So the Chet and Bernie books are first person narration, and this is third person close, which I love to do because you're kind of on the shoulder, and so you can. It's really good for doing unreliable kind of stuff. So I just dove into it really without. I didn't sit down and make a list. Oh, she's going to have to say this type of thing, and this is the kind of clothing. I just let it rip and see if it happens. That's my crazy methodology.
I forgot to ask you, tell us why the book is called UNSUB. What does that actually mean?
Yes. UNSUB stands for unknown subject. It's the unknown subject of a criminal investigation. It's a law enforcement term, particularly an FBI term. It's the bad guy.
Right, it's enforcement speak, in
Yes,
other words,
exactly.
right? Yeah, not quite an acronym, but more, I'm always trying.
Shorthand, yes.
Yeah, a shorthand, exactly. Yes.
I'd really like to know what kind of dog it was.
This
in
dog?
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. It doesn't say, right, inside. So I don't know.
You didn't have any
I wanted a
dog in
big,
mind?
dark dog with this tail that has a story. Because the dog's been through a lot too. And I didn't want it to be some highly pedigreed. This dog's had a rough time. But I didn't take it any farther.
And don't despair, because the dog doesn't show up right
Yes,
at the
so-
outset. You have
right,
to keep going for the dog.
I'm dealing with that already too. What? The dog's not on it? The dog comes into the story at
It's just
exactly
the
the
right
moment
time.
Leanne needs that dog.
That's right.
It was
So,
great.
Thanks. But I
I really
didn't,
like the dog.
and of course the dog has no name in the beginning either.
We have a rescue dog, and none of us can figure out, me and my husband or I can figure out how anyone could abandon her because she's so unbelievably cute and small. But, you always wonder, you wish that they could tell you their story. How did she become, a rescue dog?
I think you can get an idea of the story from their emotions. You'll never know, like, the specific, but whether it was, whether their life has been good or not so good.
And dogs really live in the present.
Oh.
As you show us with Chet so often.
They sure
Oh, look, it's a squirrel, right?
They never figure out where the squirrels go when they run behind those trees. At least my dog never knew what
No.
up meant.
If I could only be like that.
Yes.
You have many different kinds of dogs. I associate you with the golden retriever or something.
Well, yeah, so
But do
I
you
have, is it on this?
lots of
No,
other
it's a
dogs?
different picture. I have, oh yeah, they are here. Okay, so if you look at the back flap, you can see the two dogs that are now, but those are just the dogs now. So the black dog is Audrey. She's half Bernese and half golden. She's 12 years old, still jumps in and out of the car. And she lives outside most of the time and feels that the borders of our property are actually way larger than they are. So she barks if she feels that someone's on our territory. But our territory seems to envelop many of the neighbors as well. The other dog is Pearl, who's a pure golden retriever, and she's a more indoorsy dog. So from my office, over the garage, I can watch them when they're out. So let's say some stranger drives up. Okay, Audrey, the black one, runs down barking the road, and Pearl runs to the house to get in.
We exchange emails. I remember writing to Peter once and saying to him, how is it that you, are able to write and speak for Bernie? And he said, I just look out my window and there are the dogs out in the yard.
And I've been doing
and
it
they
for
sort of
30
speak
years.
to me. I know, but
Different dogs.
But yeah, it was an interesting answer.
Well, what I meant was, when I said I associate you with the golden, have you had like a Scottie like Iggy, or have you had a poodle, or have you had?
No,
different kinds of
I've
dogs?
had mutts and goldens, pretty much. No, so I haven't had a Scottie. But I've dealt with, I've known Scottie.
Inspirational Scottie. You can't have an inspirational serial killer, but he can have an inspirational Scottie.
And I've certainly known Iggy types.
That doesn't have to be a Scotty.
No, you're right.
Well, probably it's time for you to eat your cupcakes, which means first we have to sign books. But before we do that, it is generally, but not every time, we try to give away a book. For those of you who've been kind enough to buy a book, Patrick King?
1 through 18.
18. Okay, that's the magic number. So happily, tomorrow night, Brad Thor will be favoring us with a new book. And I will say, in case you're listening to this, Brad, while I don't agree with his politics, I do agree with many of the points that he brings out in this book. And a lot of it are questions you both kind of address in a different way, which is, you know, how much is enough and how much is too little to keep us safe? And how do you judge that? And in crisis, how do you judge that? And where do you draw the lines? I also think that Scott Harvath, for the kind of guy that, you know, is a Navy SEAL and running around the world saving all nations and all, he actually wants to have a relationship and a personal life. And so part of the question is, can he do that? And who would want to be, in fact, in a relationship with somebody who is, you know, leaping into flaming tankers and, you know, all the rest of it? It's not a great prognosis. So anyway, I like use of force, and Brad will be here tomorrow night to sign it. So let's see, Meg, did you want to pick a number between 1 and 18, and we will give this book to that person? 17. Well, you can come back tomorrow night and have Brad sign it, or you can stay home and read it, as the case may be.
Thank you.
Tomorrow night is our last event for June. It's been a remarkable month. I think we have like 5 author-free days. July is going to be like that, but it isn't going to start until July 9th with Linda Castillo, and then Kathy Rice, and we go through this. Keith McCafferty, Beatrice Williams, Daniel Silva will be off-site on January 15th, Saturday night. And then it goes on from there. So it's going to be a very exciting summer. Last summer was pretty quiet because it was an election year, and so fewer books were published and fewer authors were on tour, so we had kind of a quiet summer, but not this year. It's going to be very exciting. So thank you all for supporting us. Let's give our authors a round of applause. If you wouldn't mind standing up and folding up your chairs and leaning against the wall, I'm going in quest of forks for cupcakes. We have over there some delicious lemon shortbread and some lemonade and all. So please help yourself to something. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.